In the marbled silence of a Parisian palace, a woman observes her own image reflected in dozens of mirrors arranged in a circle around her bed. It is 1920, and the morning light filters itself through Bordeaux silk curtains, projecting golden shadows over the face that no longer recognizes as yours. At the age of 55, Greffulhe's Elizabeth raises a trembling hand to the face. His fingers slide over wrinkles that appear to have appeared at night, such as ancient porcelain cracks left in time. The mirrors do not lie, never lied. And that is precisely why she hates them with an intensity that burns like acid in their aristocratic veins. Each reflection multiplies its decay with mathematical cruelty. The neck that once rose like a real swan now bends under the weight of years that it desperately tried to deny, buy, bribe. The jewelry, Cartier diamonds that captured the light as captured stars, pearls of the East that cost whole fortunes, sapphires inherited from the Austrian nobility and polished by the time and blood of generations, rest on the skin as ornaments on an altar abandoned by the gods. She touches them one by one with the desperate devotion of a penitent, as if they were amulets capable of returning the lost time to resurrect the goddess he was. The silence of the palace is more deafening than any scream. There is no longer the rustle of silk dresses in the corridors. There is no longer the tilint of champagne glasses in the halls. There is no longer the reverent murmur of admirers vying for their attention. There are no more visits scheduled weeks in advance just to contemplate its legendary beauty. There are no more photographers waiting patiently with their heavy equipment, ready to capture another impossible angle of its perfection. There is only her, the Venetian mirrors who witnessed their daily obsession for decades, and the cruel truth that multiplies infinitely on each reflective surface. That the most photographed woman of her era, the muse who inspired poets and painters, the living goddess of Parisian halls, became a prisoner of her own decay image. The morning air carries the ghost perfume of roses that no longer flourish in the neglected gardens of the palace. Each breath is a reminder that time has passed, inexorable like the tide, carrying with it everything she tried to preserve. The Bordeaux curtains, chosen specifically because they favor their skin tone, now only filter a light that reveals in cruel details each line, each stain, each sign of a mortality that it refused to accept. If you enjoy stories about women who have challenged time and paid the supreme price for this hubris, consider subscribing to our channel. Each story we tell is a relentless mirror of what human being means in a world that values only the gleaming surface, ignoring the dark depths that throb below it. Marie Elizabeth of Caraman-Chimay. Riquet is born in the golden fall of 1860, when Parisian leaves paint the city with colors that mirror the decaying splendor of a French aristocracy that still tries desperately to recover from the revolutionary trauma that beheaded their ancestors and spotted their palaces with blood. Daughter of Prince Joseph de Riquet, de Caraman-Chimay, and Countess Marie de Montebello, names that echo through the halls of history as invocations of a power that no longer exists. It emerges in a world where female beauty is no longer a desirable attribute, but a more valuable currency than gold, an instrument of more sharp power than any sword, a silent weapon capable of knocking empires, raise fortunes, and rewrite destinations with a simple smile of perfectly designed lips. Chimay's castle, where she spends the early years of her childhood, is a separate universe suspended in time as an iridescent soap bubble that refuses to burst. There, surrounded by tapestries that narrate medieval achievements, portraits of ancestors who observe with dead but still eyes, for furniture that carries the patina of centuries of privilege, Elizabeth learns the first lessons of her peculiar education. That she is not a child like the others, but a work of art and development, a precious investment that must be cultivated, refined, polished to a perfection that transcends the merely human. Since early childhood, when her golden hair captures the light of Gothic windows as liquid silk strands, Elizabeth understands, with the cruel intuition of children, that she was endowed with something rare and dangerous, a beauty that transcends the conventions of her time as a comet transcends the predictable orbits of the planets. At the age of 12, he already arouses looks of non-innocent admiration in the halls of the Parisian aristocracy, where men with gray beards and women of closed fans stop their conversation to observe it pass with the reverence normally reserved for divine appearances. At the age of 15, poets whisper his name as if it were a magical invocation capable of opening portals to more beautiful worlds, and his words echo in the cafes of Montmartre, where hungry artists dream of capturing their essence on screens that will immortalize them. At the age of 18, painters make pilgrimages through Europe only to beg the opportunity to capture their image, as if it were a heavenly appearance that could disappear at any moment, taking with it all the beauty of the world. But beauty, she learns early through the silent observation of adults around her, is both divine blessing and ancestral curse. In a world where women exist primarily to be contemplated, admired, desired, and possessed, she finds that being the most beautiful means carrying the overwhelming weight of all expectations, all repressed desires, all male projections of an entire society that sees her not as a person endowed with her own thoughts, feelings, and aspirations, but as a work of living art, an object of aesthetic contemplation that must be continued eternally. Unchanged, like a Greek statue in Carrara marble that resists centuries through its perfect immobility. The silver oval mirror that ornays your girl in the girl's room reflects not only an angelic face of traces that seem carved by Praxiteles in her most inspired dreams, but also the first insidious signs of an obsession that will accompany her as a faithful shadow to the deathbed, the almost pathological need to preserve itself as a perfect and unchanging image, as its existence depended exclusively on its appearance as its existence. If it were not a person, but a living picture that must remain eternally young to continue to exist. Each morning, with the discipline of a novice dedicated to sacred rituals, she studies every trace, every curve, every shadow of her face, with the obsessive meticulum of a scientist studying a secret formula that could turn lead into gold or ensure eternal life. The Chime family, aware of the astronomical market value of the daughter's exceptional beauty in a society where weddings are commercial mergers disguised as novel, invests in their aesthetic education as serious as others invest in stock market actions or real estate properties. Private teachers imported from Vienna and London teach him to walk with a grace that transcends the merely human to reach the divine, to smile without creating a single line of expression that can tarnish the perfection of his face, to tilt his head at mathematically calculated angles, to maximize the devastating impact of his traits. She learns French, German, and English not to communicate more effectively with other human beings, but to whisper words that sound like heavenly music to the male ears eager for beauty. Studying piano not for the love of Chopin's art or the genius of Bach, but because delicate fingers like pink petals sliding on ivory keys create tableau of femininity so irresistible that powerful men are capable of war and peace for it. Each lesson, every exercise, every moment of its aristocratic education shapes it not as a complete and multifaceted person, but as a refined product to the extreme, polished until it shines like diamond under any light. And products, however refined and valuable, exist to be admired, desired, acquired, and consumed by those who have the resources to buy them. On a spring morning of 1878, when Paris awakens under an impossible blue sky that seems to be painted especially to bless the event, Elizabeth, at the age of 18, and at the height of a beauty that poets have not yet found adequate words to describe, marries Henry Greffulhe, the earl of one of the oldest and prestigious families of the French nobility, whose ancestral crushes and whose Croatians fought, and whom the palaces of kings have been adorned for forgotten centuries. But this marriage is not for a second, a union of passionate hearts that are on the altar to swear eternal love, is a carefully orchestrated theatrical show with the accuracy of a Verdi opera, a calculated fusion of aristocratic strains that seeks to perpetuate a world in terminal decline through the ostentatious pomp and the extreme luxury that blinds the observers for the rotten one from the surface. Gold. The ceremony takes place in Notre Dame Cathedral, its Gothic towers lifting themselves against heaven as stone prayers directed at a God who may no longer listen to the supplications of the dying aristocracy. The whole gratin of Parisian high society is present, durables whose families date back to Carlos Magno, bankers whose fortunes rival national treasures, artists whose works adorn the halls of the powerful, diplomats that weave intrigues between champagne bowls Dom Perignon. Elizabeth walks down the cathedral's main corridor as an appearance straight from the skies, wrapped in an Alençon lace veil that belonged to Empress Eugenie, and carries in her delicate fibers the ghosts of an empire that collapsed as a card of cards. Each step is calculated with mathematical accuracy to maximize the devastating visual impact of its entrance, each choreographed movement to create the illusion that it is not a woman of flesh and bone walking toward the altar, but an ether goddess coming down from heavens to bless the mortals with their divine presence. The dress, creation of the best Paris couturiers who worked for months as modern alchemists transforming silk, pearls, and diamonds into three-dimensional poetry, transforms it into an appearance that transcends the merely beautiful to reach the sublime. It is not a bride who walks through the hallway of the cathedral, but a work of living art, a materialized dream, a fantasy made flesh that makes experienced men tremble like teenagers and mature women cry with envy and admiration simultaneously. The tail of the dress, embroidered with golden threads and splashed with diamonds that capture and reflect the light of the candles like stars trapped in fabric, extends behind it like a river of liquid light, creating a trail of beauty that remains in the retina of observers much after it passed. But behind the theatrical beauty that blinds the gifts as a solar eclipse, there is a disturbing void that echoes through the centuries. The emptiness of a woman being delivered not for love, but as part of a refined commercial transaction. The marriage represents the official beginning of his golden prison, a cage made of the most precious materials in the world, but still a cage. As Greffulhe Countess, she must completely dedicate herself, obsessively, to the maintenance and improvement of her public image. Its function is not to love deeply, or to be truly loved. It is not to develop your brilliant mind or explore your unique talents, but exist exclusively as a living symbol of aristocratic perfection, a more valuable human ornament than any jewel, which validates the status of her husband in her social class through her mere existence. Henry Greffulhe, her newly admitted husband, is a 45-year-old man, practical and calculating as a banker who sees her wife for life, but an extraordinarily successful investment. He does not seek deep emotional intimacy or transcendent spiritual connection, seeks incalculable social prestige that Elizabeth's exceptional beauty automatically gives the ancestral name of the Greffulhe family. Marriage works with the cold efficiency of an extreme refined commercial transaction. It provides noble title, considerable fortune, and social protection. It provides incomparable glamour, cultural relevance, and the envious admiration of the whole European society. The early years of marriage go as an infinite and dizzying succession of dances that last until dawn, literary soirées where they recite verses dedicated to their beauty, diplomatic receptions where their presence is worth more than international treaties, intimate dinners for 50 people, where every detail is orchestrated to enhance their perfection. Elizabeth quickly becomes the undisputed and irreplaceable star of Parisian high society, each apparition her awaited with feverish anxiety reserved for historical cultural events. Photographers compete with each other, sometimes reaching the roads, the opportunity to portray it. Journalists of the most prestigious journals describe their dresses with reverence normally reserved for sacred relics. International renowned artists make pilgrimages to their palace just to contemplate their beauty and try to capture in their works a fraction of the perfection it incorporates. But the psychological price of universal worship is progressive and relentless dehumanization. She gradually ceases to be Elizabeth, a woman with complex thoughts, deep emotions, and personal aspirations, to simply become the Countess, a title that precedes her in any environment, defines her in the eyes of all who see her, and gradually, methodically, consumes her inside like golden cancer. In a society that values women exclusively for its ability to beautify the world and serve as aesthetic inspiration, it will discover, through decades of bitter experience, that being the most beautiful means being the most vulnerable to time, the most exposed to nature, the most intended for suffering when youth inevitably begins to fade as flowers in the fall. Each morning, she wakes up not to live an authentic and significant life, but to play a role in social theater, to embodying an impossible ideal for female perfection. And representations, however technically perfect and artistically inspired, are always ephemeral as soap bubbles that shine magnificently for a moment before they burst into the cold air of reality. During the 1880s, when Paris turns into the cultural epicenter of the modern world and Belle Epoque flourishes like a poisonous garden fed by the blood of colonial empires, Elizabeth's obsession with his own metamorphosis image is a common aristocratic vanity in a particular and devastating religion, a personal worship dedicated to the preservation of his beauty that consumes his hours, his thoughts, his dreams, his thoughts, his dreams, 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 their 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 dreams, and finally, your soul. Each day is born with a complex and thoroughly choreographed ritual that rivals in complexity with the ceremonies of the old temples. It dedicates no less than 6 morning hours, from 5 to 11 in the morning, exclusively to obsessive care with its appearance, examining every square millimeter of its skin with magnifying glass, where the best optical artisans in the world cracked lenses that reveal imperfections, revealing imperfections, invisible to the unarmed human eye. His personal aesthetic care team grows until he includes 15 specialized professionals, each responsible for a specific aspect of his routine. Masseurs who dominate secret techniques learned in Tibetan monasteries, where monks have developed methods to preserve skin elasticity through accurate manipulation that stimulate blood circulation. Private cosmetics that prepare creams, ointments, and lotions using formulas stored as state secrets, combining rare ingredients such as newborn lamb. Blood, goat milk powered exclusively with clover of the Alps, hills collected from gardens of French monasteries, essential oils that grow only at specific altitudes of Himalayas. Each product is tested extensively in its own skin through experimental applications in discrete areas of the body, and those that do not produce immediately visible results are discarded without hesitation, regardless of their astronomical cost. His palace in the prestigious Avenue du Bois, elegant artery, where only the richest and most powerful of Paris resides, gradually becomes a kind of pagan temple dedicated exclusively to the preservation and worship of beauty. Elizabeth's private rooms are completely redesigned to accommodate their growing obsession. Walls are covered by mirrors imported directly from Venice, where artisans who have learned their secrets of generations of predecessors create reflective surfaces of clarity so perfect that they look like portals for alternative dimensions where only pure beauty exists. These mirrors are strategically positioned through complex geometric calculations to capture each conceivable angle of your face under different types of light. Natural morning, filtered through specially tinged silk curtains, artificial light, Baccarat chandelier light positioned at mathematically determined highs, light of aromatic candles made with beeswax, fed with specific flowers that produce a particularly favoring brightness for aristocratic skin tones. The daily photographic ritual becomes an almost religious ceremony in its solemnity and accuracy. Elizabeth hires Auguste Nadar, Paris's most renowned photographer, not for occasional sessions, but as a permanent employee of his home with the sole responsibility of documenting any change, however small, in his appearance. This obsessive file of its own image will eventually grow until it contains more than 15,000 photographs, each cataloged meticulously by date, time, lighting conditions, camera angle, facial expression, and even room temperature and relative humidity, because Elizabeth develops the theory that atmospheric conditions subtly affect the appearance of the skin and should be taken into account when analyzing changes in its beauty. Photographic sessions extend for hours that seem suspended in time. Elizabeth remains motionless as a Greek statue, controlling each facial muscle with the accuracy of a Paris opera dancer, ensuring that no unwanted expression is captured by the relentless lens of the camera. She develops specific and secret techniques to smile without creating wrinkles around her eyes, a smile that surrounds only the lips while keeping the rest of the face in perfect relaxation, to tilt the head at angles that maximize the definition of her maxillary line while minimizing any appearance of incipient, to position her hands so that they seem eternally and aristocratic, even when she has passed by the 30 years. But obsession transcends the limits of common vanity and enters hazardous psychological territories. Elizabeth consults doctors in London, Vienna, Rome, and St. Petersburg, traveling through Europe as a modern pilgrim in search of spiritual salvation, but physical preservation, seeking experimental treatments that promise to delay or reverse the natural process of aging. It submits to procedures that border on refined torture, subcutaneous applications of newborn lamb blood, which charlatan doctors claim to contain rejuvenating properties, prolonged baths in goat milk imported from the Swiss Alps, heated at exact body temperature and enriched with essential oils that cost more than the annual salary of a Parisian worker, massages with rare substances extracted from plants that grow only in remote regions of Tibet, where Buddhist monks have developed alleged youth elictions through centuries of alchemical experimentation. The most disturbing and psychologically devastating aspect of your obsession is the pathological relationship you develop over time. Elizabeth cultivates an almost delusional phobia to aging, an anxiety that grows until they dominate every moment of wake and contaminate even her dreams. She strictly refuses to celebrate birthdays, treating every date of birth as a personal mourning, a cruel memory that she is a year closer to decrepitude and death, removes all calendars from your residence and prohibits watches to mark hours during your personal care sessions, as if time could be suspended, denied, defeated through its simple refusal to recognize your inexorable passage. Its daily routine gradually transforms into an elaborate set of superstitions that rival the most complex rituals of ancient religions. It develops the irrational belief that sleeping on pure silk pillows, changed daily and kept at specific ambient temperature, prevents wrinkles during sleep, that drinking only distilled and purified water through specific processes preserves the crystalline purity of your skin. To avoid intense facial expressions, high laughs, deep crying, exaggerated surprises, keeps the immaculate softness of their features. Each pseudoscientific belief becomes a mandatory ritual. Each ritual amplifies its growing anxiety over aging, creating a vicious cycle of obsession that consumes it as slow but relentless fire. Food becomes another battlefield in your private war against time. Elizabeth subsists with a strictly controlled diet that seems more prescribed medical than human pleasure. Individually selected fruits by experts who guarantee their optimal nutritional value for beauty preservation, specific vegetables grown and rare minerals enriched, lean meats of young animals created in specific conditions that have studied not only cuisine, but also the alleged effects of different methods. Cooking and physical appearance. She fervently believes that each food consumed is directly and immediately reflected in its appearance, transforming each meal into an act of aesthetic faith or sin against its own beauty. Social relationships, once a source of pleasure and intellectual stimulation, gradually deteriorate under the weight of their growing obsession. Elizabeth becomes progressively unable to maintain conversations that do not rotate exclusively around beauty, fashion, aesthetic care, or youth preservation. Long-standing friends are gradually abandoned when they begin to show the first natural signs of aging. Seeing them is to confront their own inevitable future, a cruel mirror that reflects the fate that awaits it. She comes to attend only social events where she is absolutely sure she will be the most beautiful woman present, refusing invitations to occasions where her aesthetic supremacy can be questioned or where she can be compared unfavorably with younger women. Most tragic is that by transforming the preservation of beauty into personal religion, Elizabeth gradually sacrifices everything that makes life worthy of being lived. Spontaneity that allows unexpected discoveries, genuine joy that is born of unnatural moments, profound emotional connection with other human beings, who requires vulnerability and authenticity, the possibility of intellectual and spiritual growth that demands time and energy today, an energy that demands time and energy that requires time and time and time and energy, that demands time and time and time and energy, that demands time and time and time and energy, that demands time and time and time and time today. An energy that requires time and time and time and time and energy that requires time and time and time and time and time today. An energy that demands time and time and time and energy that demands and time and time today. An energy that demands time and time and time and energy that demands time and time and time and time today. An energy demands today devoted to physical maintenance. It exists increasingly as a work of living art that retains through constant and obsessive effort. But works of art, as technically perfect and aesthetically inspired as they are, do not truly live. Only in suspended animation to be contemplated, admired, and eventually forgotten, for others who really live, love, suffer, and grow. The cruel irony of her situation is that, in the desperate attempt to preserve her beauty against the corrosive action of time, she is wasting the most valuable years of her life, the years when she could be accumulating significant experiences, developing deep relationships, exploring latent talents, contributing to the world that transcends mere physical appearance. But this irony remains invisible to her, obscured by the mist of her growing obsession and the anxiety that consumes every moment of wakefulness. The 1890s emerge as the golden decade of Elizabeth's influence on Parisian society, a period that historians will later describe as Belle Époque's heyday, when Paris shines as the light city, not only metaphorically, but literally illuminated by the newly discovered electricity and the brightness of the jewelry that adorn the most beautiful women in the world. During these years of maximum glory, Elizabeth completely transcends the boundaries of mere social celebrity to become a cultural phenomenon of historical proportions. Her image is reproduced obsessively on postcards that travel through Europe by bringing her beauty to the most remote corners of the continent. Her clothes inspire international trends that are copied from London to Petersburg. Her most insignificant gestures. They are studied, imitated, and perpetuated by young aristocrats who dream of capturing a fraction of their divine grace. Marcel Proust, then a young 20-year-old writer obsessed with the high society and the mysteries of involuntary memory, becomes a frequent attendant of his halls, where he absorbs not only the atmosphere of extreme refinement, but also the subtle psychological details that will later turn into some of the most beautiful pages of world literature. Decades later, when writing to La Recherche du Temps Perdu, will immortalize Elizabeth as one of the main inspirations for the Duchess of Guermantes, capturing in words that flow as music the essence of beauty that transcends the merely physical to touch the sublime, but also the tragedy of a soul imprisoned in its own perfection. The Greffulhe Palace in Avenue du Bois becomes the undisputed epicenter of Parisian cultural life, rival in cultural prestige of the most legendary halls in French history. Elizabeth organizes soirées who become legendary even as they happen. Events where the greatest musicians of their time are presented as in an earthly artistic Olympus. Claude Debussy, the young composer who is revolutionizing French music with his impressionist harmonies, devotes him compositions that capture in musical notes to ethereal quality of his beauty. Gabriel Fauré creates pieces especially to be executed in his presence, melodies that seem to be born directly from his own aristocratic soul. The dinners that offers mere food to become accurately choreographed, theatrical shows that rivals the productions of the Paris Opera. Every detail, from the mathematical disposition of the imported flowers daily from southern France to the meticulous choice of the colors of their guests, is calculated to create an environment that enhances its own beauty as a picture enhances its central figure. The most renowned photographers in Europe make regular pilgrimages to their palace as devotees visiting a sanctuary. Swimming, Dessary, and other masters of photographic art compete for the honor of capturing their image, each session resulting in portraits that become immediately iconic, reproduced in aristocratic magazines and studied by artists as supreme examples of female beauty. These carefully posed and enlightened photographs create a visual mythology around you. It is not just photographed, but deified through the camera lens. But it is precisely at the moment of greater social and cultural triumph, when its influence reaches proportions that rival historical personalities, which arises the first devastating crack in the seemingly perfect porcelain of its existence. On a spring morning of May 1895, when she turns 35, an age that carefully hides from the world as if it were a crime against nature, Elizabeth discovers, during her morning face, Tupa's facial ritual, the first wrinkle of her life, an almost imperceptible line in the left corner of the right eye, so subtle to any normal observer, but under the mildew men's magnification, but it appears as a Carrara marble crack, a defect that contaminates all surrounding perfection. For any other woman of her age and social position, it would be a completely insignificant detail, a natural and inevitable mark of the passage of time, as normal as the sunrise or the change of stations. For Elizabeth, who built her entire identity, all her reason for existing, all her value as a human being about the seemingly solid foundation of perfect and unchanging beauty, this first wrinkle represents no less than the beginning of personal apocalypse, the first end trumpet of the time announcing that the empire of its beauty, like all the empires of history, is intended for ruin and forgetfulness. The discovery of this microscopic imperfection triggers an existential crisis of devastating proportions that shakes the very foundations of its carefully built psyche. If your entire identity is based on absolute physical perfection, if your value as a person comes down to his ability to inspire aesthetic admiration, if his reason for existing is reduced to the maintenance of immaculate beauty, then what happens when this physical perfection inevitably begins to deteriorate? The question haunts his nights as a persistent demon, turning sleep into an epic battle against recurring nightmares where he is prematurely aged, forgotten by the society that worshipped. It, irrelevant in a world that began to value younger and less marked faces. Elizabeth immediately intensifies their beauty rituals obsessively that borders on dementia. The 6 morning hours dedicated to aesthetic care becomes 8 hours, then 10, until virtually all of their day is consumed by desperate maintenance of their appearance. It hires new experts from all over Europe, experimental doctors who promise impossible miracles, sophisticated charlatans that sell hope in crystal bottles, subject to increasingly radical and painful procedures in the hope of reversing the natural and inevitable process of aging, subcutaneous injections of questionable substances, skin applications that burn the skin in the hope of regenerating it, massages so intensive that they leave bruises that it hides carefully under thick makeup. But every new miraculous cream, every new revolutionary technique, each new promise of eternal youth only amplifies its growing anxiety about aging, because deep down to her tormented soul, she knows with crystal clearly that is fighting a battle that cannot be overcome, a war against enemies, time, gravity, biology, mortality, which are more powerful than all the world, more relentless than any fortunes, conqueror of history. The first wrinkle becomes the obsessive symbol of its denied mortality, a constant reminder that it is, despite all its beauty and privilege, merely human, and therefore subject to the same natural laws that govern all other living creatures. And for a woman who built her entire existence on the desperate denial of mortality, the illusion that exceptional beauty could grant her a form of aesthetic immortality, to accept aging means accept not only physical deterioration, but the very end of everything she believes to be. It quickly develops complex and elaborated strategies to hide this microscopic imperfection from the outside world. It is exclusively positioned at specific angles during social conversations, always keeping the right side of the face slightly away from the main light. Avoid smiling widely as it found that intense facial expressions accentuate the visibility of the incipient line. It applies strategic shadows with increasingly sophisticated makeup, creating optical illusions that disguise the defect. Each camouflage method is temporary and requires constant maintenance, but the psychological effort needed to maintain these defenses is permanently and emotionally strenuous. The impact goes far beyond merely cosmetic. The first wrinkle represents the first fundamental fissure in an entirely built identity on fundamentals that it now realizes that they are tragically temporary. If she's no longer perfectly beautiful, if her appearance is subject to deterioration like any ordinary mortal, then who she really is? The question echoes through its consciousness without finding a satisfactory answer, because Elizabeth has never developed a personality, interests, or talents beyond those directly related to the maintenance and display of their physical beauty. His education, his relationships, his social activities, everything was shaped exclusively due to his exceptional appearance. Without it, or with it diminished by age, there is only a frightening void where a complete person should exist,